Hello and welcome to Fathoms Deep. I'm Daphne Olive. Sadly, Liz can't be here. I know that's killing her because I'm here with Meganne Young, our very own Abigail Ash.
Hi!
Meganne, it is so great to have you here. I don't know if you understand the extent of the love the fandom has for Abigail. I'm going to assume that is outside, I mean, definitely within the Fathoms Deep community. The Abigail love is huge.
Oh, that's so sweet. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited, actually. I'm so excited to hear that. And so, because I live in my little bubble and I'm never sure if anyone you do a project and you kind of forget about it and you wonder if people are still interested, and then the project moved on to different seasons and I obviously wasn't in those seasons, but it's so lovely to hear that people still think of my character and still love her. And
love her so much. We actually play, we like to play a lot of Twitter games with our listeners, which is a lot of fun. And one that we'll get to a little bit later in this interview, but I wanted to start by reading for you a few. We played a game right before season 4 where we had people use the hashtag season 4 Make-A-Wish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And just, telling us things that they wanted to have happen in season 4, understanding that the Black Sails creators were going to take us where they were going to take us. we all knew that. But yes, Abigail came up quite a few times. So let me just read some of them to you. So Kay Clark Photography said that her season 4 Make-A-Wish was Billy and Abigail settled down to raise a batch of tall, earnest children.
I love that. I love the Ash Bones love. I did see a lot of that.
There's a lot of Ash Bones love. All right, I'm not sure where there was another one I pulled up, but there were I think 3 that came up with Abigail. I think I also officially said one because I really wanted the very unrealistic thing for Abigail to come back and be a pirate, because I really thought,
my gosh,
I thought that Abigail's pirate heart was like pretty awesome at the end. Very much questioning.
I'm pretty sure I said that to someone while we were shooting. I said I wanted to kill someone. I was like, I think Abigail should kill someone. I think Abigail needs to cross over. She needs to find some darkness and slash someone to pieces.
Yeah.
I think it might have been Dan's shots actually. And he was like, okay, calm down. We're on episode 4. You just got here. Calm down. But I would have loved that. I would have loved to have her be a pirate.
I see. So cool. This is like you and Hannah needed to team up. I mean, first of all, I do have to say that was not even remotely Abigail's job in the story, even though it was something I totally wanted. I think one of the Make-A-Wishes we got was that somebody wanted Abigail to come back and be Mary Read.
Yeah, I did hear that. I did hear that rumor and people wanting that. I did hear that. Amazing.
So that would have been lovely. But yeah, not really. But it's funny. In Hannah's interview, she talked about how she's like, give me a knife, she had them make a knife or something. So the two of you needed to team up, and the two of you wanted to kill, and Jess wanted to ride a horse. Which okay, I guess it's time for us to discuss whether you've seen season 4. Let me just tell the listeners, let me remind the listeners who don't know this, or tell them if they do. South Africa actually is 2 seasons behind. Is South Africa watching season 3 now?
We've watched season 3. We're up to date to season 3. I actually watched it on Netflix. Mm-hmm. I think it's on TV here as well. I have not watched season 4. I am terrible. I know. I'm sorry. It's either that or illegally download it, and I don't want to do that.
There you go.
So,
okay. Abigail, Megan is a person full of honesty and earnestness.
Moral fiber. That is what I'm made of.
Fantastic. So wait, where was I going with that? Oh, that
you were just telling everyone that I suck and I didn't watch season 4.
No, you're fabulous. I just wanted to preface that before I say that Jess did actually get to ride her horse.
Yes. Good. I did not know that. Yay.
Yeah. I was very excited because she did talk about that at New York Comic Con. But yeah, so the Abigail love is great. We are going to later on in this interview talk about choose your own adventure stories, which is a topic that has come up like bizarrely in many of our interviews. So I've decided to insert it into this one because there was so many dear wishes for our dear Abigail. So I wanted to ask you, like, tell me things about your vision for Abigail.
I loved Abigail as the observer. I loved that she was able to see both sides. I mean, that was essentially her role in terms of like telling a story in season 2, was she was showing the monsters and the men and the monsters. So I loved that about her, and I loved that she was able to kind of see the grayness between good and evil. It's not just a clean line between the two. I mean, if I think of her like moving forward from that situation, it would be very difficult to just go back and just be that sweet, innocent creature that she was when she left London on that boat. And I think she definitely would have taken a lot of lessons with her. And I don't think she would have been the type of person to just block it out and just forget about it and shove it under the carpet and move on and get married and have babies, unless it's with Billy.
Right.
That would be different. That's a different kind of story.
Your sense is that Abigail was as instantly smitten with Billy as we all think.
Well, I don't know if instantly smitten. I think it was probably just a case of she's 16 at the time, and she would have had a very sheltered life in London. Now she's amongst all these like strapping, strong men, including Billy, who's probably maybe closer to her age, I guess. I don't know. There's probably a mixed age there, but he's a good-looking guy, and she actually gets a chance. He's okay. He's okay. But finally, kind of settle down and feel safe enough to look around, and she's not blind.
Right.
So,
I mean, it's funny for me. Yeah, so if you ever listen to the to our podcast episode about that, like Liz is quite smitten with Billy Bones. I've always less smitten, I guess. For me, what was fascinating about that moment was that moment of recognition, like the thing that Abigail actually says, the thing about saying like he's someone I could have known. Like for me, the most interesting part of that moment was the part of her process. Wait, can we go before we start talking about her trip on the ship, which is such a dense, wonderful episode? I've had a question for a long time about her, because you did just speak about her innocence. And the moment that Abigail became interesting to me was when Charles Vane is talking to her and said that he cut off Ned Lowe's head. And the way you said good.
Yeah.
I loved that so much. I loved that this is a story that subverts expectations all the time, right? So our first vision of Abigail is, in that hammock or however they're carrying her passed out. It's like, could not be more damsel in distress if they tried than being surrounded by Ned Lowe's men and that whole situation. And I think that's the first time we hear her speak, is that conversation. And the way you said good with not venom. I don't even know how to describe that. It's honestly one of my favorite lines in the show, is the way that you delivered that line, that she was truly satisfied and a little vengeful, but not like, you didn't take it to the other side where you were like, oh, okay, this is a damaged person and we can't, you know what I mean? We can't trust her, because we needed to trust her later on.
Yeah.
But it was,
I think it's just a very realistic response. I mean, that was also very much in the writing of it. Obviously it was scripted,
yes.
But I think it was a very realistic response of, this wasn't just, I mean, Ned Lowe was on a whole different spectrum.
Yes.
Everyone else is kind of in the gray area, and you can see the many sides. Ned Lowe, there was no other side other than like pure evil.
Yep.
So yeah, in that moment, I love that moment. I love that scene actually, because it was, you immediately knew that this girl, like all the female characters, had strength in her, that she was a strong girl. And to kind of say that and be open about it in front of another scary male pirate.
Kind of scary pirate, yeah.
Like, in that moment, she was like, I'm not scared of you. I'm just very satisfied,
right.
And that's a little snippet. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
No, it totally does. I loved that. I mean, for me, it really did. It just, I felt like it opened my eyes and made me realize that
Yeah.
Abigail wasn't going to be even remotely, according to the type that you're led to believe she's going to be. And
Yeah. And it also, I think, is just that conversation and that exchange. She's very intelligent and she's aware of the situation.
mm-hmm.
She's aware of like the subtext of Vane's questions.
Yes.
And she is thinking about what's happening and thinking about how to move forward and how to best take on the situation. So she's not a complete damsel in distress.
Not at all.
Which was wonderful to play.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, of course, anyone listening to this podcast knows, one, that the writing of the show is amazing, knows that I am madly in love with the writing of the show, but you deserve a lot of credit for the execution. This was
thank you.
It's not a huge role, and you managed to really I think we'll get into my thoughts about Abigail, but I think that Abigail is one of the most central parts of the larger theme of season 2. Like, I see that the large theme of season 2 is truth and how that can be seen in different ways and what that means to different people. And especially in the context of us finding out what Flint's backstory is and what his, kind of the truth behind what we thought we knew about him. And then Abigail is this person standing between, these pretty scary pirates, and how she relates to each of them and each of them in relation to truth. But before we get there, I have another question for you. Oh, wait. I have so many questions. I'm like having a hard time organizing them. Wait,
that's fine.
Before we talk about, I want to talk about Abigail and Eleanor, but before we talk about Abigail and Eleanor, I would love to talk about something that I thought of. I was so excited that we had already talked about doing an interview right before Liz and I spoke to Zach McGowan for the second time. We just interviewed him, and he had a really neat insight about Vane and Flint and going to Charlestown, like exactly about the season 2 stuff. Was that Vane, up until that point, I mean, we know his backstory, we know his life a little bit, but the interesting point that he made was that when he went to Charlestown, like, that was the most, like, up until when he saw Charlestown, Nassau was the closest thing to civilization he had ever seen.
Yeah, he had ever experienced.
Right,
yeah.
Right. So he comes completely from a world devoid of, the civilization as framed in the story. And so for him, Flint was basically not at all a pirate. He was, in essence, the closest thing to a representative of civilization that Vane had.
Oh, that's so interesting, yeah.
So what's interesting to me about that, so then he sees Charlestown and he's like, oh shit, basically Nassau was nothing.
Yeah.
But what it instantly made me think of was the flip side of that, is that Abigail, we have other characters later on who come from the world of civilization and we see them in Nassau. Mrs. Hudson is a big example of that.
Yeah.
But Abigail was our first example of that. Your character was the first person we saw see the world of the pirates firsthand for the first time. I mean, I guess maybe with Silver, I don't know. It's impossible to know with Silver because we don't really know what his backstory even is.
Yeah.
It's so much a part of what Abigail's role is in the story. But how do you feel like, well, she did have a very stark introduction.
I was going to say, I mean, like, the way, it's not like she got off of a boat calmly and then was like, ooh, culture shock. Right. It's like, kidnapped.
That's very true.
Like, ooh, the food's a bit different. Don't know if I like that. So poor Abigail really, like,
I know, poor Abigail.
Literally thrown in the deep end. But yeah, I think it was definitely, like, because, even just like watching it back myself, like, she's, as a viewer, she's like quite precious. She's the ultimate outside eye, because even though she's heard stories from her father, and she's heard quite a brutal story with Thomas Hamilton's father, she's just been so untainted.
So maybe her culture shock, like maybe the closest thing she got to, like, hey, the food's different here, is when she was talking to Eleanor in those tunnels. Like, that was, I feel like, the one time that Abigail actually kind of maybe showed her hand a little bit, like, because she was too scared to do that when she was on the ship to Charlestown. Like, her whole questioning of, like, are you from here? Is your father one of them? Like, so how do you feel about that conversation. I thought that was fascinating because also Eleanor is a person of that world.
Yeah.
Yes and no. Like that's a different conversation of how much Eleanor is of that world and how much she isn't. But
Yeah.
But that's kind of the closest thing Abigail got to like, oh, so this is how you do things here?
Yeah, exactly. I think, yeah, exactly. And also just sort of when she comes, you're talking about her escape, right?
Yeah, the
When
escape,
she's
exactly.
been given the letter and she's found this from the letter from Miranda Barlow and just being delivered to her from Hannah's character.
Mm-hmm.
And they had that discussion. I think she's just purely curious, like I said earlier, that she's the ultimate outside eye, and she's had this terrible experience, this culture shock immediately, and this like, how are you here? How does someone who looks like you and could be me and essentially was me be here and handling this and dealing with this? This doesn't make any sense. I don't understand this. This isn't the kind of like world that I come from. Yeah, I think that would have been very confusing for her. But
yeah, confusion layered on confusion.
I'm just like, even talking about it, I'm like, wow, Abigail really handled this whole situation very well. She totally took it in stride. It's actually it's just quite interesting. And I also think just thinking about it, the shock of it, realistically, the shock that you would experience in a situation like that, up until the moment where she falls into Miranda's arms and cries. Mm-hmm. I think that's the moment you realize that she is like terrified and is a child.
Right, that she is a little girl. Yeah.
I think it's the shock and the adrenaline of like trying to self-manage that situation internally.
Absolutely.
To be in control as much as she can. Although
I love that she's like, even in that situation, even during the escape, I mean, she could have just followed Eleanor and just done whatever, but she's a fascinating person, and she's an inquisitive person, and she's a thinking person. Like the fact that she even bothered to ask those questions, she didn't need to do that. I mean, I'm sure she was trying to some extent suss out whether this is actually legitimate.
Yeah.
Like, whether this rescue is actually a rescue at all.
Yeah. Yeah. But also just like the respect that because she even acknowledges that, I think she even says that Eleanor must be a formidable person.
That is the word she uses, yeah.
That she has survived in this situation. And I don't know if the word thrive is the word that I would use.
I don't think that's a word I would ever use for Eleanor. Yeah.
No, never. Wrong word. I just said that. But you know what I mean? Like she's taken the situation and she's made the best that she can in that situation. She has survived. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah. She's a survivor.
No, that's totally true.
Yeah, and I think innately in Abigail as a character, she is a survivor, even though, she maybe up until this point has never seen that in herself or experienced a situation to bring that out. She's quickly discovering that she is.
Yeah, absolutely. And right. And so, so smart. I mean, so, okay, let's get to the diary writing and that whole process. I love that. I mean, I just have to like pause for a second to just say that is one of my favorite episodes of the show.
Yeah, it was mine too.
And it is such a beautiful process. I mean, it's beautiful. The writing is beautiful in that, I mean, I feel like there are moments in the show where the themes that go throughout the whole story kind of start to weave themselves together in new ways and in ways we hadn't, to kind of bring us to a different place with them. So I think it's really cool that your character got to be basically the voice of that.
I know, it was such a gift.
So actually. Cool.
It was such an amazing gift, like as an actress, and like honestly, like the first real big role that I'd ever had. It was like quite an amazing experience to be able to give a voice.
That's so cool.
Like that, to narrate a whole situation and to be tying in all these themes together over an episode was amazing. It
was totally amazing. Yes, that's so cool. I'm so happy to hear that was your experience of it, because definitely for the viewers it was a terrific experience. I wanted to there's so many things here. Is there one aspect of it that you particularly are tied to? And that'll give me a second or two to come up with one of my own. I have so many.
During the actual entries that she makes into her diary, it's a pretty easy grasp to say the monsters and men line.
Right. You get the inverse. Like you start out, saying, what if these men are actually monsters and they're just doing this performance for me? And
Yes.
then you get the flip side that they have their own monsters and one of them is my father. Ooh, it gives me chills
Yeah.
to this day. I love
Yeah.
it so much.
It is amazing how she does that transition. She works through that whole thought process and purely through observing and listening. Right. I think the thing is what I loved about it, and I think what I hope people watching it really enjoyed and took on, that is such an important thing in life, not just in Black Sails, but to be able to observe situations and to see that people aren't necessarily born the way they are, but they are formed through their experiences. And that's how we learn about Flint and everyone that's on that boat. They have lived a life that's brought them to that point, including Abigail. And she's heading towards a situation where at that point, I think she knows that her father is probably not just the pure good Lord Ash that she would, want, or he would want her to imagine him to be. So she's aware of that and heading into that situation and just knowing the multiple sides. Anyway, I just love the journey that she takes while she's writing.
I do too. I love it so much. She serves so many roles for the viewer as well, because in addition to being a witness, which, we haven't had a lot of that, but she's a special witness within the world of Black Sails, because she is a person who is of civilization, like from civilization, but not the powers that be. So that is, I think, a really interesting role. There is, when you do watch season 4, and there's a speech at the very end, there's a moment where Flint shows some amount of learning that he's had about how his own experience generalizes to people at large, and not just oppressed people, but actually he starts to see how the systematic oppression actually affects both obviously oppressed, but also the people who, like Abigail, like someone, he doesn't mention Abigail, but that someone in that class who's like part of civilization, but isn't pulling the strings. Those people's strings are being pulled as well, basically. And so Abigail, I feel would fit into that. And I feel like that's what Abigail sees, is that she comes to see how her own strings have been pulled to make her believe the things that she believes coming in.
Yeah, and how she's been conditioned into believing what reality is. And reality is not that. In fact, reality has many sides. Right. And in a way, not to say that she has nothing to lose from being immersed in this different environment, this more volatile, rough around the edges, this environment that's not considered civilized. But it's not the same as like her father, who would lose if he sort of sided with the pirates and felt sympathy towards them and agreed to help Flint without any kind of payback. What would that say for his reputation? What would that do to his position of power? So it's all a power play ultimately, all these characters playing up against each other. So, and with Abigail, she is in a position of power, but it's sort of out of her control. She's in a position of power because of who she is and the knowledge that she has. And her power is a little bit more subtle and hidden under the layers. She's not an obvious player.
Well, she benefits from the game, and benefits from, has benefited from the stories that were told. I mean, because again, this always, because it's Black Sails, everything comes back to how power is executed through the telling of stories.
Yeah.
But that's a beautiful thing. I mean, it's an amazing thing to watch someone, that moment where she has the realization that her father is, in fact, for some people, a monster, and then she chooses to warn them. That's the moment that she makes a choice. I mean, that's a huge deal, that she could have just said, hey, well, maybe my dad's a bit monstrous. This seems to be benefiting us, and I'm just going to either be too afraid to speak up or just choose not to speak up because I will choose to protect my standing. Those were choices she could have made, and she didn't make those choices. She made a different choice.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
In my eyes, I mean, when I think, I'm so sorry, I keep doing this. Like when I think about all 4 seasons, and when I think about what possibly influenced Flint in particular, I think, I mean, again, it's not in the text, but I think it makes a lot of sense to think that possibly his experience, like as much as Abigail's experience of knowing James, this was like one of the moments in the show where we didn't know whether to call him, like what to call him anymore. It was like we just started calling him James when we weren't sure if he was being Flint or not. Like when he meets Abigail and like his voice catches and he introduces himself, we were like, okay, now we have to start calling him James because he's not Flint quite and he's not McGraw either anymore. So we didn't know what to call him. But I think that as much as Abigail was obviously changed by the experience of her understanding, in my view, like his later, like I said about the speech later on that you'll see someday, and it will blow you away. That I almost see like that Abigail may have been a part for him of coming to the place where he got to, of seeing that, you know, of reminding him, because I'm sure he knew that. I mean, he used to live in England, but reminding him that there's more to civilization than the pain that was inflicted on him.
Yeah. I can totally see that he would see her and see that there is an innocence and there is a good that still exists in the England that he left behind, the England that he was essentially thrown out of.
Exactly.
I think she would have definitely reminded him of that. There's like a moment when she's writing in her diary in his and he walks in and he said and she's kind of like closes and gets up and it's
that was
very
such
awkward.
A teenage moment. I loved it so much.
Yeah, you know, it must have been, I mean, for him, as much as she does represent, you know, it reminds him of that good, it also is seeing how that good perceives him.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that turmoil that it gives him to know that he's created this character, this person that he has to embody.
It's terrifying.
And it is terrifying. And it must, for him, it must have just been, you know, to just see a young girl like that look at you that way and kind of scuttle off in fear and complete, like, don't come near me. It must be strange.
I know. I think I did claim back in whichever episode when they meet, when she escapes and then he introduces himself. I think I did say back then, I've definitely always believed that with all of the things that he did, with all of the things he went through, I feel like that is actually one of his most courageous moments, is when he actually sits down and introduces himself to her, because he knows that is the moment he's being confronted with the 10 years of whatever it is he had done.
Yeah, it's a hard moment.
It is a hard moment.
And Abigail's just like eating her soup. Like, what up, homie?
Abigail's like, yeah, whatever. You're pretty scary, but I met Ned Lowe.
Yeah.
Can we get on to the finale? I know. Oh, wait, no. Before that, there's the moment when she tells them to stop beating on him.
Yes.
That is so
Oh
good.
my God. I love that moment. It's particularly those moments that when she says good, when she makes the decision and she sits down in front of Flint and she says, I know who you are. I know the story and I know what my father's going to do and I'm warning you. And then the moment of saying stop, like they're telling the truth.
God, that was
friends of my father, making that choice and using her position.
But hesitating first. She was so afraid to do it.
Yeah.
Like the fact that so that she was like almost whispering it at first, that the way you did it, that she was like not barely saying it. And then she was like, wait a minute, I get to do this.
Yeah.
It was so cool.
And knowing that she's capable of doing it and knowing that it's the right thing to do, even though it's a hard thing to do.
That's like her power and her internal power. I mean, that's the thing. It's like that she was capable, like in the hierarchy, that was her right and her strength to do it. But you got to actually, in that moment, watch Abigail realize it and choose it. You know, so that's the thing. I just feel like you did an amazing job of showing Abigail's like growth in the moment and the choices she's making, because that was beautiful. Like that she was afraid to stand up. And I mean, God, you know, after all she'd been through, I think your average person would be afraid to speak in general, let alone
in a situation stand
like
up to this like giant man beating up the other giant man. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought that was really beautiful, because it is a perfect recognition of her complex relationship with the inherent power she has from her station.
Yeah.
versus the kind of emotional turmoil that she has gone through about what that means.
Yeah.
I mean, she just had this whole realization about how the power structure that she exists in may not be as benevolent as she thought.
Yeah. And I also think in a lot of ways, it's like finding the balance between, she knows that she was captured because of who her father is. And she knows that she has that power in that moment because of who her father is. So she is aware of that. Right. But it's also the ability to admit and acknowledge her own power of being able to wield it and to manipulate a situation. So I think that was also quite interesting layer of her character.
And it shows us so much promise, because as a person who is a thinking person, a person who can so quickly kind of transform her preconceived notions, the idea, I think this is part of why everyone wanted Abigail back.
I know.
In addition to your amazing performance, but that's part of your performance, is that you express that so beautifully, was that the promise of a person in a place of relative power, not as you just said, like it's her father's power, but to see someone that's within that structure who is in it because of her station, but that possibly has the ability to think outside of it.
Exactly. To see the possibilities, that she can use that as a platform to move forward, and not necessarily in the same direction that her father's going in, but a different direction.
Possibly for justice, possibly for, or at the very least, more open-mindedness. I mean, it feels like everyone at that point had reached a place of such closed-mindedness on both sides.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that Abigail, I mean, especially in season 2, when you had this, really hopeful period of the flashbacks. Of this, like, oh, we could build something new, and then you have, well, okay, that's not working out, and then all turmoil, and then I feel like that moment, the moment actually where Abigail said stop, was like, and we're about to get to the piano scene.
That is my favorite scene,
and rightfully so, Missy. It's so good.
It is.
Okay, let's just go forward to that. But yeah, the idea that Abigail is someone from within that power structure, even if limited power herself, but that gives a shit about truth. So yeah, let's talk about that scene. Tell me about that scene for you.
I really loved that scene. I loved working with Nick. He was really great. I mean, it's so wonderful to hear how people appreciated my performances, but I also have to acknowledge how much help and support I was given on that set, because I was like a total newbie, and they had to be really patient with me. I mean, being on a set like that, whatever scene you were shooting, there's always like a bazillion people around, and so many choices. Like, you get a page, and as actors we always talk about different choices. And for example, that scene with Nick was definitely a situation where we did takes, we had this beautiful lighting, we framed it so nicely, everyone was doing their job, and then Nick and I were in this two-hander. And he was the one who actually, he gave me a little, like, why don't you try it this way? And we played a little bit off of each other, and it was definitely a moment that was created from, like, the two of us. But it was just such an amazing feeling to be in that position, to be calmly aware, as Abigail, to be calmly aware of the situation and the chaos and the violence happening outside. And I'm sitting in this beautiful room in this beautiful dress at this piano, and to know so concretely that these are the facts, this is what I see, and you are in the wrong, and to be able to say that, and to be so confident in that fact that you can just say it. And like, saying something to your dad is like, that's the one person, like, that's the person you bicker and you argue with, and like, it's a different kind of dynamic than saying it to somebody who works for your dad, who essentially works for you, or to say it to a friend. But to, like, confront your father, this powerful man, and to watch Nick's reaction in that moment he's just so, like, raw and revealed, and she's right. And it was such a great moment. And even shooting it was quiet and set, and the intimacy of it was just, like goosebumps,
It's such a good scene. Okay, after what you said, I don't want to get into the themes of it. I just want to leave it at that because it's just so beautiful.
Oh, like, no, well, we could still chat about it. You could cut it off. It was a good scene.
So wait, so you are okay, fine. Let's get into it because this is where the whole truth thing comes into me.
Yeah.
Like this was like a moment that for me, I mean, I had seen just to tell you the background that our listeners know. Like I had started watching Black Sails around when season 2 aired.
Yeah.
So I was watching the second half of season 2, in I think in real time. Like I actually got to I started watching the whole thing, but I binged like up until the middle of season 2.
Yeah.
And then I was actually watching week to week.
Okay.
And for me, that was just such a huge moment because I was really so moved by season 2. Season 2 is incredible.
Yeah.
But then in season 3, we get to the place where you have Vane doing the exact same thing with Miranda's piano, which is why in Fathoms Deep World, there are a few things that, there are a few words that like one person will tweet and then everyone will just, Twitter cry.
Yeah, exactly.
One of them is piano, obviously clock.
Yeah, yes, piano clock.
And the last one is teacups. That doesn't actually have to do with, that has to do, and you'll see, watch season 4, you'll see teacups reemerge. Okay. Teacups reemerge in season 4. That's a Miranda thing, not an Abigail. But piano is both. I mean, that callback to, I mean, again, both of those piano moments, I love that they're the same. I love. Did you freak out when you saw that? Like, when you saw Vane doing it? I love that. I can't imagine. I would have loved to have seen your reaction when you saw Vane like doing that on the piano. And I love that because it is the piano. I mean, the piano obviously represents a woman's part of the world of cultural civilization. Like it's so hard. You have to kind of like separate out or not civilization, the kind of hierarchy, the structure, and civilization, the things that we usually think of, like pianos, like drinking tea, like, although the season 4 makes the two of them like live in relation to each other as well, thematically in a really fascinating way. But for me, the moment when Vane was doing the same piano thing brought back what I had originally thought about Abigail's place. I said this in the beginning, her relationship to Ned Lowe, to her two captors, like to Ned Lowe and to Vane, who are both pirates who talk a lot about truth. Like they talk a lot about truth and honesty, like that Ned Lowe's whole speech to Eleanor about basically like, I'm this vicious, scary person because I'm so honest about my nature. Yeah. And Vane has this, kind of evolving, like he's always been a character that claims to be truthful. And I think he is. Like he doesn't have that thing that Flint has of like, let me wear another character. Let me pretend to be multiple things, either to get the goals I want or to preserve some sense that I'm still a human being or whatever it is that Flint's doing at any given point. Yeah. Vane doesn't have any of that, right? He just is what you see. And he is who he is. And I love that Abigail is then existing in relation to those two people because they're kind of the starkest, like if you had a spectrum of pirate to civilization, right? For me, this thing with the pianos like put Abigail in this really fascinating place because if it's possible that Abigail is like then kind of the crux of the whole thing. Yeah. Like that Abigail is completely of civilization versus someone like Vane who's completely of not civilization. Yeah. And then this thing that ties them together because what they both do is that they're plain speakers. Is that's what Abigail becomes, is a person who speaks truth. Yeah, I love that. I love how you've brought that together, actually. That makes total sense. Yeah, and she does speak truth. I also just as you were chatting, I just really like the idea, if that piano is that symbol of civilization, it's that idea of her, say she played a piano in London and it's her coming back and how she has changed and the shift that has happened. So she's putting, she's revisiting that symbol of civilization and how does she sit there changed. And she's not playing a song. She's not playing something beautiful. She's tapping away at the keys and listening to the haunting sound that comes out of the same thing that makes beautiful music.
it also creates this haunting sound. And I think that's quite a powerful image as well.
It is. And I guess, yeah, the words I should have been using, which is civilization, which is the structure, versus domesticity. Like, that's the thing.
Yeah.
That's what it is. The piano is a thing of domesticity.
Yeah.
Which is a word division that we've used in the past to like differentiate between those two things. But yeah, you're right. And some listeners have brought up the fact that the way that you were hitting the key also does have a bit of a feeling of a chiming of a clock.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Just, just add another layer of sadness and hauntingness on it. Because that's fun. We love
ticking
that.
away the time until Flint is hung, which she's not, but that's what she's doing.
No,
tapping away the time.
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite lines in that scene is the way, does Peter Ash ask? But she says, he basically says, what's going to happen. And she's like, you're going to kill Mr. McGraw.
Yeah.
And I was just like, yep, that's exactly what he's going to do. I love that. See, and that goes back to that thing, the plain speaking. It's just like, we're not playing with like truth here. We're just saying what's happening.
Yeah, exactly. I love that as well. It's just like, as I said, just calmly, like, these are the facts. This is what's happening.
Oh, goodness.
And
that calm is a little terrifying, to be honest.
Is it?
It is in a way, because you know what she's been through.
Yeah.
For me, like, the kind of emotional aspect of that scene to me felt like that Abigail is so traumatized, like that playing the one note on the piano. I love your idea that's, it's like, I love it and it's heartbreaking. The idea that she's going back to something from her life in London, but she's going back to it and not doing what she always, like, she's so changed that she's just, it just felt like an expression of trauma to me. This playing the same key over and over again.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And just that you cannot go back. And I think that's for every character in this story. You cannot go back. You have to keep moving forward, and however you evolve. And most of the time you pick up more and more scars and more injuries, and that's sort of reality of what's going to happen.
Right. Well, especially in the context of Flint and Miranda talking about Flint setting Flint aside.
Yeah.
And that he was talking, he told the story about the Flint that his grandfather met and then who just disappeared. And that's why he chose that name.
Yeah.
So that's a really, that's a very poignant concept throughout the show is, can we choose? And that's, I love that Abigail's language is about that, like, very much fit with this idea that we had of Flint, of like that he was choosing to show different sides, and that was always the question: was James McGraw just like wearing? I think we used to say wearing a Flint coat.
Yeah.
Was he just because he always is wearing like he always has to have like a captain's coat and he loses it and he gets a new one. So we were like, is he just wearing a Flint coat or is he actually Flint? And that's, I feel like, that's a question you ask yourself throughout with all of the characters. Like, do they become stuff? Can someone choose to become something for the sake of storytelling and not have it influence them?
Yeah. Or, do you kind of lose the ability to choose? You create this thing thinking that you can take it off, but you actually become it involuntarily. Right. And then you have no choice but to live it until its end. Can you really take the mask off once you've put it on? Which is kind of interesting.
Exactly.
Interesting thing.
Right. Well, and that goes to what Peter Ash thinks of himself as well, I think. I think Peter Ash sees himself as a good man who made these strategic choices, but that I think until he was confronted with James and Miranda and with his own daughter's opinion, I think he was doing a really good job of convincing himself that the good man wasn't influenced by the choices that man made.
Yeah.
And then, stark reality.
Yeah, exactly.
In the form of a teenager.
Yeah, exactly. Out of the mouth of babes, isn't that it?
Yep, exactly.
And then also I think when you're so involved in something like all these characters, when you're in the immediate and you're involved in it and you have this outside person come in and go, this is what's going on actually. So whatever you're telling yourself to make yourself feel better and to sleep better at night, that's not reality, and you need to admit that and you need to acknowledge that.
Exactly.
oh, she's so awesome. They should have totally brought her back.
She's so awesome. I know.
It was so heartbreaking because people would like, you know, they were shooting season 3 and again in season 4. And I would get messages from people saying like, is Abigail coming back? And I didn't want to say no. So I would always say something sort of ambiguous and say like, oh, you'll have to watch and see, but it's going to be amazing, which it was amazing. But I must admit, I was like, oh, I want to come back just because it was also so great to be part of it, but also because she was so amazing. And yeah.
She is so amazing. Well, again, and that's what I said is just that she really spoke to people. I mean, it's just, I feel like relative to the amount of screen time, Abigail is the character in my experience as a podcaster of having people who communicate with me about the show all the time. Relative to her screen time, Abigail is the person who has the most conversation about her.
Oh, wow.
I love that. Yay. I love it so much.
That too. This in particular, all the seasons and how it grows and progresses and how I was talking about it with someone today, actually, because I said I was doing this. And really, like, even talking about the South African actors that were involved in it and the kind of community that erupted that was Black Sails, like what they did for our acting community here, for our film community here, but also the process of working together. It really was a family, and everyone really looked out for each other. There were no egos. Everyone was kind of just in it to make it the best that they could possibly make it. And it was such an extraordinary experience. And then to watch that and just see the impact of that experience, how it translated onto screen, because you can just see the result of that. You can see the result of the passion and the love and
you can feel it. It's been fascinating for us because everyone has passion for the quality of this thing and for each other. It's a beautiful thing. It was a beautiful thing for us that we love something so much, and to see that it was something that was created in joy and love. Yeah, it just like makes us so happy for all of you all that you had this experience of that. It was this environment that was so nice for you
and
all.
Just like the quality of every single, like, I just think about like my costumes, like the
oh my God,
like that white dress that that you see me in. So there were 2 versions of that. There was obviously the messed up one and then the pristine one. But the buttons on them, like they were individually done by hand, and like the threads were individual. And
that's incredible.
That amount of like my shoes I have like very small feet, and my shoes were specifically made for me in Germany and like for my foot. Like the detail and the buckles and every hair that was curled was just like thought about and knowledge in it, and those kind of details, the sets and everything, you just can't. It's such a beautiful show. And actually, like I feel like I started the bar so high in the beginning of everything now that I do compares to that experience. And I've said it to so many people. I'm like, you spoiled me. Like now everything has to be as awesome as Black Sails. Just crazy. And I almost did not get Abigail.
You didn't? Oh, tell me the story.
So when Black Sails was first coming to South Africa, funny enough, I actually auditioned for Eleanor's role. That's so funny.
Of course you did.
I think they were kind of testing the water to see what talent was available in South Africa. So, but it was kind of funny, to do that. But when Abigail's role came up, I totally bombed my first audition. It was so bad that the casting director, Krista Schamberger, who's lovely, called my agent to ask her what was wrong, like if something, because it was just awful. Like my accent was terrible. Because it was that tragic. Like I just was terrible. And then, I left and I knew it was bad. And it was like, oh, I'm never going to get that. It was, I don't even want to look at it again. And then my agent called me and she's like, look, this is what she said. She said was something wrong, or what is wrong with her? Do you want to do it again? And I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, maybe it's just not for me. It's like, I don't know. I'm just not feeling it. Okay. Just give me like the weekend. And I actually ended up contacting Bo Peterson, who did the dialect. She was the dialect coach. And I worked with her a little bit. And they very kindly just threw that tape away And I re-prepared for it, and then I went back and did the audition again, and then they booked me from that audition. But yeah, I
Wow.
nearly didn't go back and do it again because I'd bombed so badly. Which I feel like if there's any aspiring actors that are listening to this that are fans of the show, like I feel like that's a nice story, because sometimes it's nice to know when people like struggle to get something. You know, we don't all just walk into these opportunities. But yeah, so it was funny. And then I remember I was like on hold for that for ages. And like for like weeks, I didn't know if I was getting it. And then they were like, there was like another girl that they were looking at. And then I got the phone call to say it was me. And I just like screamed. I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, I made
That's so great. What a beautiful role to get too. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good for the aspiring actors. That's good to balance with Zach's story, which I think like everyone told us. We finally got Zach to tell us Zach's story, where he just like super ballsy just walked in and said he is Charles Vane.
God, yes, I know that story. I know that story.
Yep.
I remember someone saying, "I am Charles Vane."
I was about to say you might be the only person who didn't do a Zach McGowan impression.
Oh, damn it. It's just too tempting to do it, right?
That's so funny. Wow. Yeah. I mean, I'm not an actor, and I can't even imagine, the immediate pressure of auditions and then the uncertainty. I think it would kill me. I don't think I have the constitution to do what you do.
Yeah, it's like constant rejection. It's you get very good at rejection, I must say. Kind of just keep rolling with the punches. But that was a good success story. A good like, okay, I'm going to try it again and do my best, and I did, and I got it, and it was great.
No, hey, I'm so pleased.
Yeah. Awesome.
Again.
Yay, I'm so glad.
Such a beautiful portrayal. Thank you.
Yay.
So should we play our game?
Yes.
Okay, since one of the great ambiguities of Black Sails is what on earth happened to Abigail?
Yes. Yes. What did happen to Abigail?
And again, since this did come up organically a lot during the period that we've been podcasting about Black Sails, I decided to ask listeners choose their own adventure for Abigail. Yeah. And actually, I wanted to start with Liz's. I couldn't find which episode this was in, but Liz's is one of my favorites. That Liz had decided. Oh, Liz, I'm sorry if I'm getting this wrong because I couldn't find it. But I remember it was something like that she would go to the colonies and eventually become a suffragette.
Yes, I love that.
Right? Totally. Isn't that a great one?
Yeah, that is a great one. Her voice will not be silenced. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes, mine, I think, is not, was like, again, you have to separate what you think is good for the story and what your heart truly wants. My heart truly wanted Pirate Abigail, and I'm not alone.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll go through some listener ones real quick.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear what.
One of them is a proper, like, Twitter story thread. So would you like to hear this Twitter story thread? Okay. Yes. So we'll start with the shorter ones and then we'll do the story thread. Okay. So Kelly Silver is in the Billy camp. There was a whole camp of people who want,
Ashburn.
Abigail.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. Let's see. Okay. Charlie says, Charlie, also, I realized this afterwards. The other time that we played a real Twitter game in relation to an interview was actually with Tom Hopper. So if you're in the mood, this is also a season 4 spoiler. Billy changes a lot in season 4.
Okay, I will.
Well, you have to think about who his character is in Treasure Island. I don't know if you've ever read Treasure Island, but he's the captain in the beginning. So like quite different than our Billy Bones.
Yeah, I've got to watch it now. God.
So our Twitter game for Tom's interview was, and this actually originated with Charlie. This is what made me think of it. Charlie, like they sometimes had those things where they would record actors reading tweets and answering them.
Yeah.
And Charlie was the one who actually, her tweet was read asking Tom if Billy is a sweet cinnamon roll, and Tom was like, I don't really know what this question is. I don't think I've ever had a cinnamon roll.
Oh my gosh. That's hilarious. That is so funny.
So that already became an adorable Twitter thing. It was that people explaining to Tom Hopper what a cinnamon roll is.
Oh my God. That's hilarious.
As a term, in relation to stories. And then our game was cinnamon roll no longer, which I believe that's the hashtag. So we had people tell us what pastry would describe season 4 Billy Bones. Oh my God,
that's hilarious. I love that.
So you can look up that hashtag.
I will.
It's out there still. It's hilarious.
Oh my God.
So Charlie said that after Ash sent Abigail to Savannah, she leaves the plantation with her new dads, Flint and Thomas, and many adventures ensue.
I saw that one. I did like that. Yeah. Her new dads. I love that.
Yeah, her new dads. Yeah. Hey, who wouldn't want James and Thomas as their dads? Seriously?
Oh my God.
Right. I know. At Buckbeak Baby, she's
great name.
Twitter handle. I don't know the name. I know. Great Twitter handle. She was sent to Savannah before the attack on Charlestown. Give me Abigail and Thomas going on adventures, please.
Yeah. All right.
Allison Stock, I think you did see these ones. Allison Stock would like for Abigail to become some sort of business mogul. Uh-huh. She said, let her wear the pants and run a goddamn business. Thomas's idealism, but with her dad's resources, and maybe she learned from Flint too. Abigail Ash is going to be sitting on top of a business empire in maybe 3 years tops.
I did see that one. Is she also the one who said she invented sunscreen?
Yes, same person.
I did appreciate that, because I have my little hashtag that I use everywhere because I love that I'm pale, and so I just that was like a personal one. I was like, yes, this person is awesome. That was fun.
That's so fun. Yes, Allison is awesome. Okay, so yes, now we get into our Twitter. So this is I'll preface this by saying these are two listeners who are also friends of mine.
Okay.
And they are, their Twitter handles are Acorn Carla and Ithaca. Mm-hmm. They have, at different moments, like just started going down the road of threads of, combined fan fiction on Twitter, and they're wonderful. And they both love the show very much, and they both have watched it many times. They know the characters really well. Their fan fictions are generally quite good. So one of them remembered that Abigail had been in one of these, and so I asked, so she was like, that thing, and I was like, oh no, you have to find that thing. But I think this is them elaborating. So it started with Vane and Abigail become friends on Ocracoke. So they set their kind of alternate universe for Black Sails characters where everyone's alive on Ocracoke. So season 3, it looked like a good camp there, you know. Teach had some really good furniture. Okay, so she says, Vane and Abigail become friends on Ocracoke. Quietly after a reading lesson, he asks her about teacups. And then this is where it continues. She's all grace and tact as she tells him about that, although I don't know why they're having that conversation. Since everyone is alive and well in Ocracoke, that's what I told you about teacups. Uh-huh. Thank you very much. On Ocracoke, everyone has the time and safety to become slightly more friend-like, which has led to Vane attending Miranda's tea parties, which of course left the captain utterly bewildered, though he'd never admit to such, even when getting his finger stuck resulted in spilling hot tea on himself. He felt reasonably assured that Abigail, I really need to send this to Zach too. He felt reasonably assured that Abigail would be willing to fill him in. He draws the line at sugar, though. Never touches the stuff. It's too civilization for him. Though he ate a whole sugar lump once just to see what the fuss was all about. With his filthy fingers, plucked it right from the bowl in front of everyone as they were having tea. Hated it. Abigail has tried hard to make something of a gentleman of him, though she's having far less success than he is with her pirate training. It's not her fault. He has a willing student after all, but she understands and respects what it means to be a proper pirate, and he now washes his hands as long as no one's looking. He claims not to see the point, but secretly enjoys the floral-scented soaps Abigail has gifted him.
Of course he does. Of course he does. Like a selection of wisteria, rose, and lavender.
Yes, I have to send that to Zach as well. He
That's amazing.
will
Please
be super
email that
amused.
to me or send it to me.
I will. I'll send
That's
you the
so
link to the
sad.
thread so you can have it forever and ever and ever.
Totally love that. That's great.
So yeah, so what I want to know, and probably I'm gonna guess that pretty much everyone who's listening to this podcast has really just been waiting for me to ask you this one question.
Oh my God. Yeah. You have to ask to make it real.
I do. Tell me your choose your own adventure for Abigail Ash. And you could tell me more than one. It's a choose your own adventure. You could tell me more than one and they can choose which one they like best because, this is Black Sails. Everyone gets to choose their ending.
I love the idea of her going, she ends up in Savannah and then escapes and leaves, and the idea of returning back to kind of like this idea of civilization and the facade that it is just not going to fly for her, and she wants to go off and wear pants. She's going to keep writing books. I want her to be like a lawyer, but I suppose like I have to consider the time that she's in. Are we being realistic or are we not? But she definitely, her voice is
I don't know.
not silent.
Toby Schmitz had us do time travel for Featherstones.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. Definitely not being silenced. I do also really love the idea of her opening up like a little tea shop that's like secretly underneath. She's got like a collection of people that meet to spread the word, and like a little rebellion underneath this little pretty tea cafe cakes.
See, she could. She's young enough. Let's see. Let's think about it. Yeah, she's young enough in that period that she could have gone to the colonies, started your tea shop, and actually been someone who was like secretly printing pamphlets for the revolution.
I love that. That's my favorite idea for Abigail. I think.
Yeah, she could be friends with Betsy Ross, like help sewing the flag for the American Revolution.
Definitely. Absolutely. I do know that her descendants are Hillary supporters.
Of course.
They would have been with Hillary.
Absolutely.
They would have been like helping on the campaign, and
absolutely they would.
Great grandmommy picture in the pocket reminding us of like what we're the strength in us.
Now we need to research if there are any ashes.
No, somewhere.
All right, sweetie. This has been so lovely.
Oh, it's been so good. I'm so sorry that I've been sick. You have to maybe say that like I don't normally sound like this.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes, that is true, everyone. Meganne and I didn't tell everyone in the beginning, but you are sick and you're such a trooper for doing this with me. Thank you. You're lovely. And I'm just so happy that we got to talk.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell me about other stuff you're doing so that people can find out where to see you.
Well, the one project that you brought up earlier is Blood Drive, which has aired. So I wonder if there are some Black Sails fans that have gone and watched.
Oh yeah, there are.
Oh, good. I play a very different character to Abigail. So for those who haven't watched it, like I think it's worth seeing that maybe. But the whole series as a whole is pretty crazy. Not everyone's gonna love it, but.
Right, and has a lot of others. Okay, I guess this is where I fess up. You didn't watch season 4 yet. Craig Jackson, I'm sorry, I have not yet watched Blood Drive. I promised you, and I haven't watched it. So I'm going to have to ask, because I know there are, other than you and Craig, there are also a lot of Black Sails actors who are in Blood Drive, yes? I don't.
There's Craig Jackson. There's also Sean Cameron Michael, who was Eleanor's father. He's got a great role in it and is amazing. So yes, and me, obviously.
I know, and I will watch it, Craig. I'm renewing my promise.
Watch it.
I really
I feel like we should like go our separate ways. I need to watch season 4. You need to watch Blood Drive, and then we should reconvene and then just like merge the podcast about the two.
We could do a season 4 Black Sails Blood Drive mashup story.
We should do that. And then we should discuss like how the characters would interact with one another. Like, what would Abigail Ash think of Nurse Anne? And,
oh shit!
Yeah,
Wait. We need to do that with Craig.
We
need
should.
to totally do that with Craig.
We should pull in Craig and a couple of others. We should do like a big mashup and see. And we could like write mini scripts and then play them out for you.
Okay, that I want. Okay, listeners, that was not a promise, but that's a really great idea. So I'm going to leave that in the podcast.
Yeah, you should. Yeah.
Let's see if we can. Okay, Craig, if you're listening, that was an official invitation.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell me other projects that you.
I've got 2 more that are coming out. One is called The Dating Game Killer. I'm not sure of the release date of that. I think it should be by the end of this year, but I need to check. But The Dating Game Killer is...
It also sounds like possibly not very Abigail Ash.
Yeah. No, well... Actually, there might be a little bit more similarity between Abigail and the character I play in that. And then and then there's a film called The Kissing Booth, which is for Netflix, which is coming out next year.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it's with Joey King is in it, and Joel Courtney. So it's also very different from Abigail. It's set in a high school. I'm playing a 17-year-old. I haven't seemed to be able to move away from my late teens, which is kind of because I am not in my late teens, obviously.
You are very, very young. You do have a very, very young looking face.
Good. I'm 21. I'm perpetually 21. But yeah, that's coming out. You know, that for a while there was like, I had a bit of a joke that I really wanted to play characters that were like got to wear contemporary clothing, because I did a lot of period things.
Sure.
And I was always like in a dress and a corset. I was always filthy or on a boat or something. So
right.
I finally got to do that in Blood Drive and Kissing Booth. So those are my projects coming up.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for coming and talking to me.
I'm excited.
All right, go watch season 4. We have work to do, you and I.
I need to watch season 4. I need to catch up on the podcasts about season 4, and then we need to get together and do our mashup. So
that sounds brilliant.
Like Pinky Promise over Skype. Pinky Promise.
Okay, Pinky Promise over Skype. Oh, I'm in. That'll be fun for me.
Deep is a Common Room radio production. For more information and access to other programs, please visit us at commonroomradio.com. To show your support, pledges of as little as $1 a month can be made to patreon.com/commonroomradio. Join the conversation by using the hashtag FathomsDeep and follow us on Twitter at BlackSalesCast. We ask that you keep your tweets respectful and positive, and please avoid spoilers. If you have more to say, we want to hear it in all its spoiler glory. Email us at podcast@commonroomradio.com with Fathoms Deep in the subject line. Thanks for listening.